Her phone rang. One answer. And suddenly, she was no longer free. "You belong to me now," were the chilling words that bound her to a dangerous mafia empire. This isn't just a wrong number. It's the beginning of a relentless pursuit and an unexpected obsession. Prepare to be on the edge of your seat as we unravel the terrifying truth behind a wrong call that claimed a life. The bookstore always smelled like dust and cinnamon, a tired blend of old paper and the coffee Elena brewed in the back room. It was small, tucked into a corner street where the streetlights flickered more often than they glowed steady. For Tahlia, the shop wasn't just a job, it was her refuge. The quiet shelves never judged, never mocked her for being late on rent, never asked why her hands trembled when she counted out coins for groceries. They just stood there, heavy with stories that didn't belong to her. Elena leaned across the counter, dark curls tumbling forward as she whispered, "You're going to wear holes into that notebook with all your math, Tahlia. It'll be okay." Tahlia pressed her lips into a line, shielding the page with her palm. Rent due, utilities overdue, credit card balance gnawing at her like a slow infection. "It doesn't add up," she murmured, tapping her pencil against the paper. "I'm short. Again." Her friend reached across and squeezed her wrist. "You'll figure it out. You always do. And if not..." She flashed a smile, trying to soften the ache. "We'll rob a bank together. We'll make headlines." Tahlia laughed, though it was brittle. She didn't tell Elena about the landlord's call the night before, his voice dripping with menace. "One more week, girl. One more. Or the locks change." She hadn't been able to sleep after, her stomach twisted with the fear of finding her belongings dumped in the rain. By the time the last customer left, the city was already dark. Elena hugged her tight before locking up. "Text me when you're home safe. Promise?" "Promise," Tahlia said, pulling her jacket close against the bite of autumn air. She walked the 4 blocks to her building with her head down, every shadow whispering at her nerves. Her apartment was quiet. Too quiet. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound. She reheated leftover soup and ate it standing by the window, staring at the parking lot where her car sat like a broken toy. Her phone buzzed just as she set the bowl in the sink. An unknown number glowed across the cracked screen. For a heartbeat, she hesitated. Maybe it was the landlord. Maybe another bill collector. Maybe Elena from a borrowed phone. She answered. A hard breath filled the line, and Rafael's voice dropped to ice, calm, controlled, and deadly certain, as if speaking to a man who already feared him. "The shipments through the docks aren't clean. Customs are bought, 2 million and counting. The gambling ring in East Haven? It's protected by Captain Reyes himself. I've got the ledgers, the tape, the transfer slips. I've got the men who will testify. Tell Mason this. Move with caution, because I've got my eyes on him. I'll burn the docks. I'll drag Reyes into the street, and I'll watch every coin of his empire turn to ash. Say one wrong thing, and I'll make sure East Haven collapses around him." Tahlia froze, her heart hammering. She didn't understand all of it, but she knew one thing for certain. What she'd just heard could ruin a man's life. A powerful man. Then the voice sharpened, suspicion cutting through the air. "Who is this?" she gasped, scrambling. I think you have the wrong number." Silence. Heavy, lethal silence. And in that moment, Rafael knew. Whoever had picked up wasn't one of Mason's men. Worse. They were a civilian. A stranger who had just overheard the kind of secrets that could get them killed before sunrise. He had expected a hardened voice, one of Mason's men. Instead, what came through was soft, unsteady, and achingly real. She wasn't part of that world. He could hear it instantly. There was a tremor in her words, not the rehearsed fear of someone playing a role, but the raw confusion of an innocent, dragged into shadows she didn't understand. And something in that trembling defiance pierced through the armor he'd built around himself. For the first time in years, he heard honesty on the other end of a line soaked in lies. That's when the shift happened. She wasn't a pawn. She wasn't disposable. She could be a target now, and that made her his to protect. Silence first, then a breath, then a voice. You belong to me now. Deep. Dangerous. A low growl wrapped in silk. Tahlia froze, her knuckles whitening around the phone. Excuse me? Her voice cracked. Another pause, as if the caller was savoring her fear. Say your name. No. Who is this? I said. The voice sharpened like a blade against stone. You belong to me now. Her heart raced, her chest squeezing so tight she thought she'd faint. I don't know what you're talking about, she shouted, half sob, half plea. The man's reply was steady, lethal, but with an edge of reason beneath the threat. I know you're innocent, but innocence doesn't matter in this world. By answering that line, you stepped into fire. If Mason's men trace it, they'll come for you, and they don't leave survivors. Her stomach twisted. I don't even know who Mason is. You don't need to, he said, voice dropping lower, intimate in its menace. You only need to know this. Once I claim someone, they're untouchable. My enemies won't dare touch what's mine, so I claimed you. That's the only way you survive. Tahlia gripped the phone so tight her hand ached. You're insane. I'm calling the police. A low chuckle slid through the receiver. The police can't protect you from what's coming, but I can, and whether you want it or not, I already did. She slammed the phone down, chest heaving, tears stinging her eyes. She backed away from the window, hiding in the shadow of her tiny living room. The phone buzzed again, vibrating against the laminate counter. One text, just 5 words. Your life is mine now. She dropped the phone onto the floor, clutching her head. No. She sank into the corner of her couch, rocking slightly, every nerve ending on fire. It had to be some elaborate prank, some horrible mistake. Tomorrow she'd wake up, and everything would be normal again. But about 30 minutes later, when her breathing had finally steadied into shallow gasps, headlights cut across her window. A black car rolled into the lot, slow, deliberate, engine idling. Her blood turned to ice. He had found her. If a stranger called you and claimed you belonged to them, would you hang up immediately or would curiosity make you listen longer? Share your answer below. The next morning, she woke with the sour taste of fear still on her tongue. Her phone lay silent on the nightstand, black screen reflecting her tired face. For a fleeting second, she convinced herself it had all been a nightmare, some fever dream born of too many late nights and too much stress. But the silence in her apartment felt different now. Thick, weighted. Her world wasn't safe anymore. She dressed slowly, tugging on her worn jeans and sweater, trying to force herself into normalcy. By the time she arrived at the bookstore, Elena was already behind the counter, sipping her first coffee of the day. Morning, sunshine, Elena said brightly. You look like you didn't sleep. I didn't, Tahlia admitted, slipping her bag under the counter. She wanted to tell her everything, that a stranger had called, that he'd claimed her, that she'd seen a car in the lot. But how did you explain something that even you didn't believe? Instead, she muttered, Just my landlord again. Elena groaned. I swear, if that man breathes down your neck one more time, I'm marching over there. He can't treat you like that. Tahlia smiled faintly, grateful for her friend's loyalty, but the warmth faded quickly. I'll figure it out. I always do. It was the truth, and it wasn't. What she wanted, what she'd always wanted, was something simple. A steady life, a small place she could actually call home, someone who looked at her and saw more than bills unpaid or another mouth to feed. She wanted safety, belonging. Things she pretended weren't too much to ask for, though the world had never offered them. Someday, Elena said, tapping her on the arm. Things are going to change for you. You'll see. Just don't go chasing it in the wrong places, Tahlia. Don't get tangled in anything dangerous thinking it'll give you the life you want. You deserve better than that. Tahlia tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and focused on unpacking a box of new arrivals. It was easier than admitting that the only change she felt coming was the kind that burned everything down. Across the city, Rafael sat in his study, the morning light spilling across polished wood and maps of territory marked in ink. He hadn't slept either, though his reason was different. He kept hearing her voice. Soft, unsteady, terrified, yes. But there had been something beneath it too. Stubbornness. She had shouted at him. Nobody shouted at Rafael, not without paying the price, and yet he'd let her. More than that, he'd claimed her. Damon entered without knocking, a stack of reports in his hand. He set them down and leaned against the edge of the desk. "You're distracted." Rafael didn't look up. "I'm considering my next move." "Your next move doesn't involve her." Damon's tone was blunt, but that was why Rafael kept him close. Damon never sugarcoated the truth. "She's a civilian. She doesn't belong in this war." Rafael's gaze lifted at last, dark eyes sharp. "She answered Mason's line. That makes her part of it whether she wants it or not. He'll know. He'll come for her." "You can shield her without bringing her in," Damon countered. "Obsession will blind you, Rafael, and you can't afford blindness now." Before Rafael could reply, Calvin strolled in, all smooth charm and easy smiles. He poured himself a drink from the decanter by the window, though it was barely past dawn. "What's this I hear about a woman?" Calvin asked, raising his glass in mock salute. "A new mistress? Finally giving us all something human to gossip about?" Rafael's expression didn't shift. "She's under my protection." Calvin arched a brow, interest sparking behind his polished facade. Protection. Interesting word. That usually means leverage in our world. Or weakness. He sipped slowly, watching Rafael over the rim. "Just be careful, cousin. Enemies are circling. If you show them where to cut, they won't hesitate." Damon's jaw tightened, but Rafael only said, "She's mine now, and no one touches what's mine." Calvin's smirk lingered even as he turned away, but resentment flickered sharp in his eyes. In a warehouse thick with smoke and shadows, Mason listened as one of his men, an insider in Rafael's group, reported the failed connection and what transpired. The line got crossed. A lady picked up instead of our contact. "And he claimed her," Mason murmured, leaning back in his chair. His fingers tapped the armrest slowly, deliberately. The room was silent, waiting. "Good," Mason said at last, his voice like broken glass. "Let him think she matters. Let him bleed for a stranger. We'll see how far Rafael's protection stretches before it snaps." A ripple of cruel laughter followed, but Mason didn't join. His eyes gleamed with calculation. Every king had a flaw. If Rafael's was a trembling civilian woman, then Mason had just found the perfect weapon. Back at the bookstore, Tahlia tried to drown herself in routine. The bell over the door chimed with each customer. The scent of coffee mingled with paper. Elena hummed while shelving the romances. It should have felt normal, safe. But everything was sharper now. Every stranger's glance felt weighted. Every shadow in the corner seemed too deep. She stacked books until her arms ached, trying to silence the memory of that voice. "You belong to me now." When the day ended, Elena walked her to the door. "Text me, okay? I mean it this time." Tahlia hugged her tight. "I will." She walked home slowly, clutching her bag, trying not to look over her shoulder. When she climbed the steps to her apartment, her heart stumbled. Something waited on the doorstep, a vase of roses, red as spilled blood. Their scent hit her before she touched them, rich and heavy. A white card nestled between the stems. Her fingers shook as she pulled it free. "Yours. R." Her chest tightened, breath catching in her throat. It hadn't been a nightmare. It hadn't been a mistake. He was real, and he knew exactly where she lived. The roses sat in the center of Tahlia's small table like an accusation. Every time she walked past, the card seemed to whisper, "Yours all over again." By the third day, she couldn't stand to look at them anymore, but throwing them away felt dangerous, like spitting in the face of someone she couldn't afford to anger. So she left them, though they turned her stomach every time her eyes fell on their red petals. At the bookstore, she tried to pretend nothing had changed. Customers came and went, flipping through the shelves, sipping coffee. Elena hummed as she stalked new titles, shooting Tahlia small smiles that said she still hadn't forgotten the exhaustion in her eyes. "You're quieter than usual," Elena said one morning, glancing up from a stack of romances. "Just tired." Elena studied her a moment longer, then shrugged with a grin. "Don't let anyone drag you into their mess, okay? Whatever's weighing you down, just remember it's not your job to carry the world." Tahlia forced a nod, clutching the edge of the counter until her knuckles ached. If only she had that choice. What she didn't know was that a pair of eyes watched from across the street. One of Rafael's men leaned against a black sedan, pretending to scroll his phone. His orders were clear. Don't interfere unless necessary, but report everything. Rafael had sent him after the night of the call. Claiming her had been instinct, but protecting her required precision. He couldn't be everywhere at once, not with Mason circling. So he made sure someone always was. It happened on a Wednesday, just after closing. Tahlia waved goodbye to Elena, who lingered by the register with a smile and a "text me when you're home." The street outside was quiet, the lampposts buzzing faintly, casting pale yellow pools of light on the cracked pavement. She was halfway down the block when the sound of footsteps echoed behind her. Heavy, unhurried. Her pulse stuttered. She sped up, fumbling with her bag strap. Then a hand clamped around her wrist and yanked her into the narrow gap between two buildings. Tahlia gasped, slamming against cold brick. 3 men surrounded her, their faces shadowed but their intent clear in their eyes. One of them stepped forward, a grin splitting his face into something ugly. He leaned so close his breath was a warm threat against her cheek. "Name's Mason," he said, pronouncing it with the reverence of a man who worshipped fear. "Well, not the boss himself. He sends us. But you heard him on the wire, sweetheart. You picked up when Rafael started talking about the docks, the customs payoff, $2 million, and the gambling ring in East Haven protected by Captain Reyes. Mason doesn't like secrets getting out. He doesn't like witnesses. You heard too much. That kind of talk burns a man's kingdom. So Mason wants the story buried. You understand what that means?" He smiled as if offering a kindness. "Well, well," another drawled, his breath sour. "Looks like we found Rafael's little pet." Her blood turned to ice. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Wrong answer," another snapped, grabbing her chin so hard her teeth ground together. "You picked up the wrong call, sweetheart, and that makes you his." The third man pulled a knife, letting the blade catch the light. "Or ours, if we're fast enough." Tahlia's heart pounded, terror burning through her veins. She tried to twist free, but their grip was iron. A scream built in her throat. And then the world exploded. A man appeared out of the dark, moving like a storm contained in flesh. 1 second, the knife wielder was sneering. The next, he was on the ground, groaning, blood spilling from his nose. Another lunged, only to have his arm wrenched backward until bone cracked. Rafael, it had to be. His presence filled the alley, sharp suit and sharper eyes, his movements brutal and precise. He didn't hesitate, didn't show mercy. Within moments, all 3 men were groaning in the dirt, their threats silenced by his fists. He turned then, dark gaze locking onto her. Tahlia pressed herself against the wall, chest heaving, fear warring with something else she couldn't name. He was lethal, terrifying, and yet he'd saved her. "You..." Her voice broke. "How did you..." "I told you," Rafael said, voice like gravel wrapped in velvet. He stepped closer, not touching, but close enough that his shadow swallowed hers. "The moment you answered, you stepped into my world. That means they'll come for you, and that means I come first." Her lips parted, but no words came. You're bound to me now, he continued, eyes burning into hers. For your safety. For my claim. There's no undoing it. Her stomach flipped, panic and anger twisting together. I never asked for this. You didn't have to. His tone softened, but it carried no less weight. The moment you answered, you became mine. That's how this world works. The knife clattered uselessly against the pavement as one of Mason's men groaned, clutching his broken arm. Rafael didn't even glance at him. His entire focus stayed on her, as though nothing else mattered. Tahlia's pulse thundered in her ears. Her mind screamed to run, but her legs wouldn't move. Not with his words wrapping around her like chains. Not with his eyes pinning her in place. And somewhere, deep in the chaos of fear, something flickered, an ember of reluctant, dangerous attraction. The estate was nothing like the cramped apartment or the narrow aisles of the bookstore. It was sprawling, walled with stone and iron gates, guarded by men who moved with the kind of sharp-eyed discipline she'd only ever seen in movies. Tahlia stood just inside the threshold of the grand hall, her shoes sinking into rugs so thick they could swallow her whole. Chandeliers dripped crystal light from the high ceiling. Paintings lined the walls, oil portraits of men who looked just as cold and commanding as the one who'd brought her here. Rafael didn't glance back to see if she followed. He moved with the certainty of a man who never doubted obedience. Why am I here? Her voice cracked through the silence, tight with anger. You can't just kidnap me. He turned, slow, deliberate. You're not kidnapped. You're protected. Mason will come again, and next time he won't send a warning. I don't want your protection, she snapped. I want my life back. You don't have a life anymore, Rafael said, stepping closer. His voice was steady, unyielding. You answered that call. You heard what no civilian should hear. That makes you part of this world whether you like it or not, and the only way you stay breathing is under my roof, under my claim. Her chest rose and fell, fury tangling with fear. His certainty, his arrogance. It infuriated her. And yet, beneath the anger, she couldn't deny that without him in that alley, she would already be dead. Back at the bookstore, Elena counted the morning till twice before realizing she hadn't seen Tahlia in 2 days. No texts, no replies, no answers to calls. The absence gnawed at her. Tahlia wasn't the type to disappear. She promised, Elena whispered to herself, pacing behind the counter. She pictured her friend's pale face, the exhaustion in her eyes, the way her hand had trembled when she'd mentioned flowers. Something wasn't right. Something had swallowed Tahlia whole, and Elena had no idea how to pull her back. At the estate, Rafael's closest circle gathered in the study. Damon leaned against the far wall, arms crossed, eyes sharp. You're making a mistake, Damon said. She doesn't belong here. She doesn't belong to us. The more you keep her close, the more you make her a target. She's already a target, Rafael replied, seated behind his desk. Keeping her close is the only way she survives. Or the fastest way Mason finds a knife for her throat, Damon countered. His voice was edged with frustration. I've stood by you through blood and fire, Rafael. But this isn't protection, it's obsession. And obsession gets men killed. Before Rafael could respond, Calvin stepped into the room, his presence smooth as silk, his smirk polished like glass. Obsession? Calvin repeated, tilting his head. No, I'd call it distraction. Our cousin here has always been clever, but clever men sometimes fall hardest. Mason won't even need to aim at him anymore. He'll just aim at her. And when she falls, Rafael will crumble with her. Rafael's eyes narrowed, voice low. Careful. Calvin raised his hands in mock surrender. I'm only advising. If you insist on keeping her, then at least consider what Damon is saying. Don't let her soften you. Don't let her make you careless. We all know what carelessness costs. The air in the room was taut, heavy with warning. Damon's eyes burned with honesty. Calvin's with venom disguised as counsel. Rafael sat silent for a long moment, jaw tight, before finally dismissing them with a curt nod. Tahlia, meanwhile, wandered the hallways of the estate like a ghost. Every room was a contradiction, opulent and suffocating, beautiful and yet so far from belonging to her that she felt smaller with every step. Guards watched her from a distance, their eyes unreadable. Servants moved quietly, careful not to meet her gaze too long. When Rafael appeared at her door that evening, she bristled. "I don't want your food, or your security," she said before he could speak. "I want to go home." "You have no home now," he replied simply. "Only here." "You can't just decide that." "I already did." Her hands curled into fists. "You think this is power, forcing someone into your gilded cage?" His expression didn't shift, but something flickered in his eyes. He stepped forward, closer than she wanted him to be, his presence overwhelming. "Power is the reason you're still alive. Without it, you'd be nothing more than another name whispered in an alley. Do you want me to let go? Do you want to see how long you last without me?" Her breath caught. The words cut, but beneath them was truth she didn't want to admit. Her voice wavered, softer now. "I don't want to need you." His gaze softened just barely. "Then hate me if it keeps you strong. But stay alive. That's all that matters." Something twisted in her chest. Rage, defiance, and the dangerous spark of something else she didn't dare name. That night, she sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the roses Rafael had ordered placed in her room. They were flawless, perfect, like the world he had built around himself, and just as suffocating. Her fingers brushed the petals, but her mind drifted to the sound of his voice in the alley, to the way he had moved through violence like it was a language he had mastered. He terrified her. He fascinated her, and that terrified her even more. She turned away, pulling the blanket tight around her shoulders. A soft scritch against the floor made her stiffen. Something slid under the door. Tahlia rose slowly, her heart hammering, and bent to pick it up. A folded piece of paper. She unfolded it with trembling hands. 6 words, scrawled in sharp ink. "He will betray you." Her blood ran cold. Tahlia lay awake in the vast bed that didn't feel like hers, staring at the ceiling as moonlight spilled through tall windows. The note, "He will betray you," burned in her nightstand drawer. She had read it 10 times already, and each time the letters pressed deeper into her chest. She couldn't tell if the fear it stirred was a warning of truth or a cruel trick meant to break her resolve. The door creaked. Her head snapped toward it. Rafael stepped inside, no suit tonight, just a black shirt, sleeves rolled to his forearms, the ink on his skin faint against the dim light. He looked less like a king of shadows and more like a man carrying ghosts. "You shouldn't be awake," he said. "You shouldn't walk into people's rooms without knocking." His mouth twitched, almost a smile, but it never quite reached his eyes. "I thought you'd want answers." Her breath caught. Answers? He sat in the armchair by the fire, the flicker of flame pulling sharp lines across his face. "You've been wondering why your phone, why Mason would bother with someone like you." The words struck deep, because they were the same questions that had been chewing her alive. She swallowed hard. It wasn't random, was it? Rafael shook his head. "No. Mason's men run their operations through unregistered numbers, burners, recycled lines. Yours was one of them before it landed in your hands. When you answered, you stepped into a conversation meant for his crew. That's why you're a target. You heard too much." Her heart thudded painfully. "So I'm just a mistake?" "Not a mistake," he said firmly. "Collateral Mason can't afford. That's why he'll never stop coming for you." The silence between them stretched. She clenched the blanket in her fists, her voice a whisper. "And you? Why claim me? Why say those words like I was yours?" His gaze burned into hers, unflinching. "Because claiming you was the only thing that would keep you alive long enough for me to protect you. Mason wouldn't dare touch what I called mine. You were innocent. I knew it from the moment you spoke. But innocence doesn't matter in this world. Power does. My claim is your shield." The floor seemed to tilt beneath her. His words were cruel and tender all at once. She hated that she needed him. She hated that without him she'd already be dead. Her voice cracked. "You don't even know me." "No," Rafael admitted, softer now. "But I heard something in your voice that night. Not just fear, defiance. Most people beg or break or lie. You fought me even when you thought I was going to kill you. Do you know how rare that is?" She shook her head, blinking back heat in her eyes. "It wasn't bravery. It was desperation. I'm tired of being powerless. I've been powerless my whole life. Landlords, debts, people looking straight through me like I don't exist. I don't want to be weak anymore." Rafael leaned forward, his voice low and raw. "You're not weak. You stood your ground against me, against Mason's men. Do you know how many men in this city fear me enough to shake when I walk past? You didn't. That isn't weakness. That's fire. And I—" His jaw tightened, words catching. "I haven't seen fire in anyone for a long time." She stared at him, heart pounding, trying to read the shadows in his face. For the first time, he looked less like a king carved from stone, and more like a man stripped bare. His eyes glimmered with something hollow, something that confessed more than he wanted. "You're lonely," she whispered. He didn't deny it. His silence was its own confession. Tahlia's throat ached. She wanted to hate him, but the walls between them had cracked. She saw not only the power and danger, but the scars beneath, the man who had built an empire and still carried emptiness like a second skin. Her breath trembled as she rose from the bed and crossed the space between them. She stopped only a step away, close enough to feel the heat radiating off him. His hand hovered in the air, as if he fought the urge to touch her. "You shouldn't be here," he murmured, though his voice was strained, fractured. "Maybe I should," she whispered back. The tension snapped like a wire pulled too tight. His hand found her cheek, calloused thumb brushing her skin as if she might vanish. Her eyes fluttered shut, and when his mouth claimed hers, it wasn't gentle. It was fire meeting fire, hunger meeting fear, both of them breaking open. Her hands fisted in his shirt, dragging him closer. His breath was ragged, his kiss fierce, as though she was the only thing keeping him tethered to this world. Every wall she'd built, every denial, crumbled beneath the raw need that surged between them. When they finally pulled apart, foreheads pressed together, breaths mingling, she whispered words that terrified her more than Mason's threats. "I want you too." The air in the room shifted, heavy with new truth. Do you believe love can start with fear and still grow into something real? Share your thoughts in the comments. The night fell heavy on Rafael's estate, shadows bleeding across marble floors as guards patrolled in silent rotations. The illusion of safety pressed close around Tahlia's quarters, a cage lined with velvet and glass. She had begun to understand that Rafael's protection was as suffocating as it was necessary. Still, when the knock came at her door, she startled. "Dinner," a voice announced. It was a servant she had seen before, brown hair tied back, posture deferential, eyes never daring to meet hers. He wheeled in a tray covered with silver domes, steam curling from beneath them. She hesitated before nodding, stepping back to let him pass. The servant set the tray down, head bowed low. Too low. His hand trembled, not with nervousness but precision. Before she could react, he straightened and pressed something sharp against her side. Her breath caught. "What?" "Quiet." His voice dropped, familiar in its menace. Not the servant's voice at all. He shoved her toward the open window where a rope ladder dangled into the dark. Outside, she glimpsed another man dressed like staff, holding the line steady. Her heart lurched. They weren't Rafael's men at all. They were Masons, disguised and patient enough to infiltrate from the inside. The first man leaned close, his whisper venomous. "Your king is arrogant. Too many guards, too much trust. but every fortress has cracks. You're the crack. Before she could scream, a cloth clamped over her mouth. The bitter tang of chloroform filled her nose, her lungs. Her last desperate thought before darkness claimed her was Rafael's face, the fire in his eyes when he had said, "The moment you answered, you became mine." Rafael tore through the halls like a storm when the alarm bells rang. Guards scrambled, their reports tangled. An intruder in servant's garb, a missing woman. Rope fibers hanging from the balcony rail. His chest burned with a fury that scraped bone. "Find her!" he roared, slamming his fist against the stone wall hard enough to crack his knuckles. "Lock the city! No one breathes in or out without my word." Damon appeared, pale but steady. "We'll get her back. Mason is baiting you, Rafael. He knows exactly what he's doing." "He took her from my house," Rafael snarled, voice breaking on the edges. "From under my roof, with my guards. I swore she'd be safe here." "You can't blame yourself for Mason's every move." "Yes, I can." Rafael cut him off, chest heaving. "Because I should have seen it coming. I should have known he'd use her." Damon's voice sharpened. "Then don't waste time drowning in guilt. Fight for her. Fight the way you always have. Ruthless and unyielding." But even as Damon's words struck truth, another voice slithered in from the doorway. Calvin, leaning against the frame, his smile carved from poison. "You see?" Calvin said softly, almost pitying. "This is what comes of weakness. You let a stranger in, and now Mason holds her like a knife at your throat. You built an empire on fear, Rafael, but the moment you let your heart get tangled, you handed Mason your crown." Rafael's fists clenched, his breath shaking. "Be careful, cousin." Calvin's smirk deepened. "I'm only saying what everyone is already whispering. She'll be the death of you. She'll cost you everything you bled to build. You can save her, or you can save your empire, but you cannot save both." Damon bristled. "Enough, Calvin." "No," Rafael snapped, his voice raw. He stared into the fire, seeing Tahlia's face in the flames. Her defiance, her whispered confession. "I want you too." The thought gutted him. Mason had her, and Mason knew exactly how to wield her against him. Tahlia woke bound to a chair in a warehouse that smelled of oil and blood. The ropes cut into her wrists, her vision swam. Shadows moved around her, men with guns pacing like wolves. Then Mason himself stepped into the light. Older than Rafael, leaner, but his eyes glimmered with the arrogance of a man who thought himself untouchable. "Well," Mason drawled, crouching low so his face was inches from hers. "So this is the voice that ruined my little secrets. Not much to look at. I can see why Rafael claims you. He always did have a taste for pretty distractions." Tahlia forced her chin up despite the fear clawing her throat. "You won't win. He'll come for me." Mason laughed, low and cruel. "That's the point, darling. He'll come, and when he does, I'll make him choose. His empire or you. He built his kingdom on blood and fire, but love," he sneered. "Love is the softest target." Hours later, Rafael received the call. Mason's voice oozed satisfaction through the line. "She's alive, for now. But you have a choice, Rafael. You bring me the ledgers, the evidence you hold over me, and you walk away from every inch of your empire, or—" He paused, letting the silence fester. "Or you keep your throne, and you collect her corpse instead." Rafael's grip tightened on the phone until his knuckles whitened. His empire, the docks, the streets, the loyalty of men who had followed him through fire, everything he had built, threatened in one breath. And Tahlia. The woman who hadn't asked for any of this, whose voice had cracked with fear and fire, whose lips had whispered, "I want you too." Mason's laugh echoed down the line. "What'll it be, King? Power, or the girl who made you weak?" Rafael's silence stretched, his heart torn between two worlds that could not exist together. The warehouse stank of rust and gasoline. Tahlia's head pounded with every heartbeat, but fear sharpened into something harder: resolve. Mason's taunts still rang in her ears, but she refused to be the pawn he painted her to be. She shifted against the ropes binding her wrists, wincing as fibers cut deeper into her skin. Her gaze darted across the room, catching the faint glint of a nail jutting from a beam behind her chair. Inch by inch, she scraped her bonds against it. Every stroke burned, every tug flayed her skin raw, but she forced herself to keep steady. One of Mason's guards wandered too close, dropping an empty bottle near her chair. When he turned his back, she kicked it with all her strength. The bottle rolled under the shadows, stopping against a crack in the wall. The faintest bit of moonlight gleamed off the glass, something Damon might notice if he tracked this far. She worked quickly, forcing a small, bloody scrap of fabric from her sleeve. With trembling fingers, she loosened it just enough to let it fall beside the bottle. Her chest ached with hope it might be found. Miles away, Damon crouched at the mouth of an alley, studying the street through sharp eyes. He had spent years cleaning Rafael's messes, but this wasn't a mess. This was war. He checked the map Mason's men had been careless enough to leave in a raided safe house, tracing their movements. East Haven docks. Warehouses coded with initials. Something glimmered in the shadows. Damon knelt, frowning at the discarded bottle half tucked in weeds near the fence. His gaze dropped lower. A scrap of fabric. Torn, bloodied, unmistakably Tahlia's. His jaw tightened. She's alive. When he brought it back to Rafael, the change was instant. Rafael, slumped in his chair and drowning in fury, jolted upright. His eyes ignited like flame doused in gasoline. "You're sure?" he demanded, voice cracking with the weight of desperation. Damon dropped the fabric on the desk. "She's fighting. She's leaving us a trail. She's telling you not to give up." For the first time since the kidnapping, Rafael's shoulders squared, his chest rising with something other than despair. Hope. It was jagged, fragile, but it was enough. "Gather the men," he ordered, voice steadier now. "Every loyal soldier. Arm them heavy. We move tonight." The rescue was blood and steel. Rafael stormed the warehouse like a hurricane dressed in black, Damon at his side, men spreading in precise formation. The first volley of gunfire shattered the silence, glass raining down like hail. Mason's men scrambled, but Rafael moved with lethal certainty. Every strike a promise, every step a vow. Through the chaos, he saw her. Tahlia, bound but unbroken, eyes wide as they found him across the smoke-filled floor, her lips parted, a soundless whisper of his name. His heart clenched so hard it nearly shattered. "Cover me!" he barked. Bullets tore the air, but he cut a path through, brutal efficiency turning the battle into carnage. When he reached her, he slashed her bonds with a single knife swipe and pulled her into his arms. She collapsed against him, bloodied wrists trembling, but her voice was fierce. "I knew you'd come." He held her tighter, burying his face in her hair, breathing her in like oxygen after drowning. "Always. I'll always come." Her fingers clung to his shirt as if anchoring herself to him. For a heartbeat, the world disappeared, the gunfire, the shouting, the smoke. It was just them, bloodied but alive, pressed together in defiance of everything Mason had tried to take. But the victory was not without revelation. As the last of Mason's men fell or fled, Rafael turned to secure the perimeter, and froze. Calvin stood in the corner of the warehouse, too calm, too poised for someone caught in chaos. A guard approached him, muttering under his breath, and Calvin pressed something small into the man's palm before shoving him toward the fight. Rafael's blood ran cold. "Calvin," he called, voice low and dangerous. "What are you doing here?" Calvin's smirk faltered for the first time. "Helping, cousin, like always." But the lie was brittle. The truth gleamed in Rafael's memory. The way Calvin had whispered poison in his ear, the way Mason always seemed one step ahead. He knew something wasn't right, but he kept calm. Though Rafael's fury burned hot, but Tahlia's trembling grip on his arm kept him steady. He could kill Calvin here, end it in blood, but not yet. Not when Mason still lived. "This ends tonight," Rafael growled, his voice carrying through the warehouse. "Mason, every betrayal. Tonight, I burn it all down." He looked at Tahlia, eyes softening even as his body shook with rage. "And no one will ever take you from me again." Her breath caught, fear and love twined in her chest. For the first time, she believed him. The docks burned with noise and fury. Steel groaned under the weight of men colliding, bullets ricocheting off crates, and the night itself seemed to hold its breath as Rafael led his men into the heart of Mason's empire. The air stank of oil and salt, blood and smoke, the ocean waves slamming against the piers as if urging the fight to end. Damon was at his side, calm and unyielding, his commands cutting through the chaos like blades. "Hold the left flank! Keep the line!" he roared, rallying Rafael's soldiers as Mason's men surged like wolves from every shadow. Rafael cut his way through with lethal precision, his rage measured, every strike purposeful. Tonight was not about survival, it was about ending Mason once and for all. Every step forward was a promise to Tahlia, to himself, that this nightmare would never circle back. Behind him, he heard her voice, sharp with defiance. "Rafael." He spun just in time to see Tahlia shove a fallen weapon into the hands of one of his wounded men. Her wrists still bore the raw burn of rope, but her chin lifted, fire blazing in her eyes. She ducked a swing from one of Mason's thugs, grabbed a jagged board, and slammed it across his back. The man went down, stunned, and Damon's men finished him. For a second, Rafael's heart clenched in a way no blade ever could. She was no longer the terrified woman who begged for her life in an alley. She was standing with him, bleeding, shaking, but refusing to break. "Tahlia!" he barked, half warning, half plea. She met his gaze, breathless but fierce. "I'm not leaving you. Not again." And then Mason appeared. He strode through the smoke like a man who believed the night belonged to him. His suit was immaculate, his pistol gleaming beneath the floodlights. His men parted around him like he was untouchable. "Rafael," he drawled, voice echoing across the pier. "The king of the city himself. And all because of a phone call." Rafael's eyes narrowed. "Your mistake." "No," Mason sneered. "My design. You think it was fate that bound you to her? That your empire shook because of some random misdial? No. I rerouted that call. I made sure it landed where you couldn't touch me. I wanted you blind, stumbling, too far to reach me. And instead," he barked a laugh, bitter as smoke. "Destiny twisted my trap into your chain. You shackled yourself to her, and now she'll bury you." Tahlia's breath caught, the revelation slicing through her. Mason had engineered her entanglement from the start, but destiny had taken his cruelty and rewritten it into something he could never have controlled. Rafael's lip curled into a snarl. "You're right about one thing." He raised his weapon, eyes locked on Mason. "Destiny decided, and it decided you die tonight." The two men collided in an explosion of fists, blades, and fury. The world shrank to their fight. Mason's cunning strikes aimed to humiliate, Rafael's raw power aimed to end. Damon kept Mason's men at bay, barking orders, his gun steady even as the numbers pressed. At the edge of the dock, Tahlia watched with her heart in her throat. Every blow Rafael took, she felt in her bones. His shoulder slammed against a crate, Mason's knife flashing as it drove for his throat. "No!" Tahlia surged forward. She grabbed a broken bottle from the ground and hurled it at Mason with all her strength. The glass shattered against his arm, slicing deep, throwing off his strike. Rafael seized the moment, wrenching Mason's wrist until bone cracked. The knife fell, clattering uselessly onto the wood. "You'll regret that, girl," Mason snarled, lunging toward her. But Rafael was already between them. His fist drove into Mason's jaw, his blade followed into his chest. Mason staggered back, shock flashing across his face as crimson spread through his shirt. "You thought you'd write my ending," Rafael growled, voice ragged. "But you were only the footnote." Mason collapsed to the dock, lifeless eyes staring at the sky he would never own. The battlefield stilled. Rafael's men roared in victory. Masons scattered in panic. Damon held his ground, chest heaving, watching as the empire Mason had built crumbled to ash. But another voice rose in the chaos. Calvin's. "You think this is over?" He spat, stepping out from behind the crates. His face twisted with desperation, his words pitched for all to hear. "I fed Mason everything because Rafael lost sight of who he was. He risked everything, for her, for a stranger who doesn't belong in this world." The men around him froze, the betrayal laid bare. Rafael turned, blood dripping down his chest, but his eyes burned like fire. "And yet she stood where you never could. She fought when you chose to crawl. You betrayed family for greed. She risked her life for mine. That is the difference between us." Damon's voice cut sharp. "Your name means nothing now, Calvin. You've been weighed, and you've already been found wanting." Calvin's face blanched as the soldiers turned from him, their loyalty shattered. He stumbled back, exposed, stripped of power. Rafael's victory was total, but it came at a cost. He staggered, blood soaking through his shirt, his strength faltering. Tahlia caught him as his knees buckled, her arms wrapping tight around him as if she could hold him together with will alone. "Rafael!" Her voice broke, tears streaking her face. "Stay with me. Please, stay." His hand brushed her cheek, trembling. "You saved me." His lips curved into the faintest smile. "Always knew. Destiny wasn't done with us." And then his weight collapsed fully into her arms, his breath shallow, his skin burning hot with blood loss. Around them, the dock still smoldered, Mason's empire finished, Calvin disgraced. But in that moment, all the world was reduced to her and the man who had claimed her life, her heart, and now lay broken in her embrace. The dock still smoldered when dawn broke. Ash drifted across the water like dark snow, the sea reflecting flames as if mourning the night's carnage. But the empire Mason had built was gone, swallowed by fire and blood. Inside Rafael's estate, silence replaced the chaos. Tahlia sat at his bedside, her hand clasped around his, refusing to let go even as sleep tugged at her weary bones. The bandages across his chest were stark white against the bronze of his skin, stained here and there with fresh red. Every rise and fall of his chest was a prayer answered. He stirred as the first light slipped through the curtains. His lashes fluttered, and those storm-dark eyes she had once feared cracked open. "You stayed," he rasped, his voice gravel, weak but certain. Her throat tightened, relief flooding her eyes. "Of course I stayed. Where else would I go?" His lips curved into the ghost of a smile, rough but real. "I thought I might wake alone, like I always do." "Not anymore," she whispered, leaning close so he could feel her breath against his cheek. "You don't have to wake alone again." By noon, the house was full of movement again. Damon entered, his expression sharp but softened with exhaustion. He leaned against the doorway, arms folded. "He'll live," Damon told her with the certainty of a soldier who had seen death too many times to mistake survival. "Stubborn bastard refuses to die." "Thank God," she breathed. Damon's eyes softened as they flicked between them. "You know, he hasn't trusted anyone in years. Not truly. But you broke through walls even bullets couldn't crack. Don't waste that gift." She squeezed Rafael's hand tighter. "I won't." Justice came swift for Calvin. Before Rafael's men, before the survivors of the battle, his betrayal was dragged into the light. He begged, swore it was Mason's coercion, but no one listened. Damon pronounced the sentence, his voice cold and final. "Exile. Leave the city tonight. Set foot here again, and you won't leave alive." The shame on Calvin's face was worse than death. He disappeared into the dark, stripped of power, his name spit like ash by the men who once stood at his side. Rafael never once looked at him. His attention remained on Tahlia. Always on Tahlia. A week later, The wounds had begun to close. Rafael's strength returned in slow degrees, his scars new but his resolve steadier than ever. Tahlia stayed with him, never leaving the estate except when Elena came to see her. When Elena arrived, her arms wrapped tight around Tahlia, tears stinging both their cheeks. "I thought I'd lost you. You just vanished. Do you have any idea what that did to me?" Tahlia laughed wetly, her voice breaking. "I know. I'm sorry. I couldn't tell you. I couldn't drag you into it." Elena pulled back, studying her. Something was different in her friend. Not just the bruises fading along her jaw, or the way her posture carried a strength that hadn't been there before. It was in her eyes, the fire, the resolve, the certainty of someone who had faced death and chosen life. "You've changed," Elena whispered. Tahlia smiled, glancing back toward the hall where Rafael's shadow lingered. "Maybe. Or maybe I just finally found where I belong." That night, Rafael asked her to walk with him through the gardens. The moonlight silvered the world, catching on roses that glistened with dew. He stopped by the fountain, his movements careful, his body still healing but his gaze steady. "You could leave," he said softly. "You could go back to your quiet life, the bookstore, your friend, safety. No one would fault you." Her chest tightened. "And if I left?" His jaw worked, his voice rough. "Then I'd let you, because you'd be free, and because I'd rather suffer without you than trap you by my side." She stepped closer, her fingers brushing his cheek, lingering on the scar along his jaw. "You still don't understand, do you? I'm not here because you claimed me. I'm here because I choose you, freely. Not as your captive, not as your shield, as your partner." For the first time, his composure cracked fully. His eyes closed, and when he opened them again, they burned. Not with fury, but with something softer, something he had buried for too long. "Then stay," he whispered, his voice shaking. "Stay, and I swear the world will never touch you again." She smiled, tears glimmering. "I already told you. I'm not leaving." His hands framed her face, and their lips met under the moonlight. It wasn't desperation this time, or fire born from fear. It was steady, certain, a kiss that sealed something unbreakable. The city shifted in the weeks that followed. Mason's empire crumbled into ashes, his men scattering, his name erased. Rafael rebuilt, not just with fear but with something new. Damon remained at his side, his loyalty unshaken, the balance between them restored. And Tahlia. She stood not in Rafael's shadow, but beside him, no longer powerless, no longer invisible. She had found strength in survival, and love in the man who had once terrified her. The wrong call had been Mason's trap, but destiny had twisted it into something greater. A bond that neither of them could deny. On the balcony of the estate one evening, Tahlia leaned into Rafael's arms as the city lights shimmered below. "Strange," she whispered. All this started with one phone call. Rafael pressed a kiss to her temple, his voice low against her skin. No, it started with destiny. Mason thought he could use it to break us. Instead, it bound us. She smiled, resting her head against his chest. For the first time, she felt not fear, not uncertainty, but peace. The world outside might always be dark, but here, there was love. Would you risk everything if the wrong call turned out to be the right person? Share your thoughts in the comments.